Hello, and welcome to another edition of Westfair Communications Video Conversations. I'm Phil Hall, Senior Enterprise Editor with the Westchester and Fairfield County Business Journal. And I have three rather interesting people here as guests on today's show. Opposite me in this row is Dr. Allyson Maida, who is a psychotherapist and business consultant, also a professor, I believe, at St. John's University. Lower row, we have Ann Ryan, who is the president of Danika Communications, a public relations agency. And joining Ann in the bottom row is Bud Hammer. He is the president of Atlantic Westchester. Almost got derailed in my train of thought, but what is Atlantic Westchester, Bud?
Atlantic Westchester is an air conditioning and heating service company, Phil. We work in commercial, industrial, and institutional buildings throughout the New York metropolitan area. And it's kind of hard to forget because behind me is the name, just in case you don't forget.
You have a whole lot of trucks back there, don't you?
Yeah, we took that picture a number of years ago for a website that we had put together. And for this Zoom video, I sort of have had some fun and created a background.
Good for you. I mean, the fact that we're doing a Zoom conversation, I think, is a testament to the change that's going on in our economy as a result of the pandemic. And it's, in many ways, it's sort of surprising to see that, because I've worked at a lot of companies where the concept of change is completely alien to the people in the company. If you wanted to introduce a different idea, they would look at you with blank faces, and the idea would go in one ear, out the other. And no matter how many times you would repeat it or try to change the pitch, it just didn't happen. And I remember saying to a fellow I worked with, I said, the problem with these people is they only understand the concept of X. If you try to introduce the concept of Y or the concept of Z, they just don't grasp it. And actually, strangely, a lot of those companies don't exist anymore, which may not be a surprise. But in today's environment—
There's a correlation there.
But in today's environment, if you're not going to be able to change, you're not going to come out of this. And let me just start with you, Bud, because how does a company like yours adapt to wildly changing times like we have now?
Change is an interesting word. And just as a quick aside, I went to a seminar at a convention as the fiscal crisis was sort of unfolding, and the sign outside of the seminar door said, "Change or die." So that was pretty plain and simple as far as how to understand that it was important. And ever since then, I've embraced change. So right now, I'm actually in a pretty fortunate position to be in the HVAC business, because air quality is beginning to be talked about as far as an important thing for helping people feel safe and secure re-entering buildings. How are we changing through this? I'm doing as much research as I can to learn as much as I can about what we're about to face, with a lot of clients asking us questions, so that we can be essentially their information source and subject matter experts to make them feel more comfortable.
Allyson, what is it about change that creates such anxiety in people who aren't willing to even consider the idea of change, let alone embrace it wholeheartedly?
I think you have to back up on that and ask yourself something behind that, which is, why do most people have trouble with change? Because it's not just the small group that says, "Oh, I'm so afraid, I can't do that." It's most people say, in fact, many people say, "I'm great at change." When it comes to real change, they're not so great after all. So you put that inside of business, or you put that inside of something that has a routine, routine activities. And now something comes in that's alien to you, that you didn't create, you have no control over, and you're supposed to change according to its demands. And that's kind of what you see. It's exactly what you see with the pandemic or any other circumstance that kind of it pulls the rug out from underneath your feet. So it's the inability to allow for a loss of control. It really is. Or to find your own control within whatever that circumstance is.
You know, Ann, I used to run a public relations agency some years ago. More than a few, actually. And I always found with a lot of my clients, I would look at their business and I would say, you're missing something here. You're missing going after an audience there. And the more proactive clients would take my ideas, and I was able to use my PR contacts to bring them into markets they weren't there before. Is this something in terms of change that you really need an outsider coming in to push for change as opposed to having it percolate from within, and my failed experiences in getting the companies where I worked with to change?
I think that it could go either way, Phil. I think clients today, some of them are panicked and they don't know what to do. And they need somebody else to come in and help them evaluate and see things that they don't see. And I think it's key that in order to succeed during any crisis, you need some help to navigate the waters. So basically, in today's world, if you're not seeing what it is that you need to initiate that change, you need to bring in somebody who can help you view that. Also, we've had a huge shift in the dynamic of media, and PR people are trained to work with crises, and we also know the media. Especially in COVID-19, everybody is looking to traditional media for their source of information. So I think that there's going to be a shift back to more traditional media and less reliance on influencers.
Well, Anne, tell us about how your business has been reacting to the pandemic. We're recording this episode at the end of April in 2020. This is for those who might be tuning in later in the year or next year or beyond. So here we are at the end of April 2020. The nation is pretty much shut down because of the pandemic. How is your business operating?
Right now, I have clients, new clients onboarding. I have existing clients who are changing tactics, and we're a firm believer in working with like-minded organizations in order to help our clients elevate and actually try to earn a living in this shut down society in some ways while we're sheltering in place. I think it's important. I know that you interviewed Cylinder Vodka a couple of weeks ago. I think that that was a company that was a young company. Stelios is a Millie Award winner. And he realized that his company was going to grow during the pandemic and is donating his entire revenue for a month to two charities that are supporting the hospitality workers. I have a hair salon, Salon Paul Michael in Westport. They decided that we're going to do curbside pickup. And for Mother's Day, we're actually doing a promotion with a florist and a fitness facility in order to expand our donor base. So I think those that are willing to embrace change, look at things differently, and find like-minded people to work with, they can thrive in this environment.
Bud, are you thriving in this environment? How are you adapting to what's going on?
I love change. Well, we're still operational. I want to thank the federal government for sending us some PPP money. I'm one of the very fortunate, blessed ones that was able to apply, and with the help of my bank, things actually went fairly smoothly. So regarding the PPP program, I have a happy story to tell. And that put me in a position to be able to continue operating. We are considered an essential service. So if any of my clients have a problem, we can certainly show up and help them out. And we do a lot of public work. So we support police stations and firehouses, and we do some healthcare work. So about 25% of my field technical force is working right now in buildings that will allow us in. My biggest challenge has been buildings that are locked up. We do a lot of school districts and office buildings and fitness centers and libraries, and all of those facilities essentially shut down over a month ago, many of which went through a sterilization process. And then as a result, they didn't want outsiders coming in to essentially ruin what they had just, I guess, cleaned and set up. But there's been some conversations about the reopening of buildings. And as I mentioned earlier, HVAC is becoming somewhat of an important factor to consider as far as air quality and opening fresh air avenues to flush out air that's been in a building as it warms up outside. Humidity and mold may be a problem. So I see this whole thing as a pretty good opportunity once the pause button is released for my company to essentially be pretty busy for the foreseeable future. The unfortunate thing is there's lots of industries that are going to be hurting for a while, and those are pretty much the places that have large occupancy, such as theaters and fitness centers and restaurants. And while we don't do a lot of work in the restaurant or retail sector, I don't think necessarily going to affect my business, but there will be businesses that will have a trickle down effect, and that's an unfortunate side.
What about you, Allyson? How has the current situation impacted your work? And how are you adapting to it?
Well, I'm an essential worker. As a psychotherapist, I have to be available, and I have some specialties. I'm also a victimologist, so that certainly helps inside of this crest where people they become victim to things, again, outside of their control for the most part. Some of it has to do with bad strategy, but, not being prepared to manage something if bad things happen. But overall, I mean, I have to tell you, I'm extremely busy between, seeing clients, patients, and also, the business portion is very busy. And I'm also a writer, so there's been a lot of, can you write an article about this? Can you please address that? Could you please, re-up our writings about something else? So it's been a lot of that. So the interesting part for me is the mechanism. Like you said, here we are meeting on Zoom, and for many people, like, who would have ever done this? I've been doing this for a long, long time. So I was very fortunate, having had worked with people who are literally all over the world. They travel, especially a lot of people in Fairfield County and Westchester, which is the base of my business, those two places. A lot of people that are traveling for work, where their kids go off to college and they don't want to stop seeing, their therapist. I've been telecommuting forever, so it's been an easier transition for me. A couple of people, only two, actually asked me if they could meet me in the office, and I said, we need to learn about calculated risk, and that was the end of that. So, it's not been terrible, but it's been tough because I didn't realize I'd missed my commute to Queens, where I teach, my criminology courses. And I find that downtime is actually a really important thing. So I've learned a little bit more about, when you're in a business where things are intense often, you need forced downtime. And that's what my commute was. Who knew? I thought I was out of my car. I was so happy. What did I know? So yeah, so that's how I've been managing. It's been good.
Well, Allyson, I would imagine that your students at St. John's wouldn't have problem adapting to getting lessons by Zoom or Skype, whatever video conferencing that they use. But how do you deal with people who can't adapt? I'm thinking outside of the business world. There's a friend of my family's, she's an associate of my mother's, woman's in her 70s, and she still really just can't grasp over the fact that her church is closed and she can't go to mass, and she's not going to watch service on the internet or on television. How do you work with people to get them to start to at least consider the concept of embracing change, if not actually pushing them full throttle into it?
It's interesting because actually my students have had a tough time, not mine exclusively, but I'm finding even with the clients that I have in the therapy practice, those that are in college, everybody has the same complaint. And it's interesting because it's seamless into this older group. Your younger set, they've been in school their whole lives. They're told what to do. My classes are hybrid classes, which means that it's half in the classroom. So it's one day in the classroom, and then it's one day online. And I'm watching my students, like in these little boxes, they look like they're melting. And I finally canned my course content and asked them what was happening. And it took a while for them to confess, but it creates a lack of motivation. They're not as motivated. Straight A students, or they're like all American everything, on the top of everything. They don't have the oomph because that innate response that you have in the classroom, that innate competition that you feel in the classroom, it's gone. And so now I know what most of my students' bedrooms look like because they're all sitting in their beds, But then all the way on the other side, you talk about somebody in their 70s. I had somebody in their 80s, and this was really, it was pretty upsetting. She said to me, I don't know why seniors don't just kill themselves, because it'd be a whole heck of a lot easier than to have to figure out this Zoom thing and this Facebook thing. She said, our generation, and it's to your point, Phil, our generation, her generation, did not have these mechanisms, or they're lightly introduced, they're not using them often, and they're heavily reliant upon their children or grandchildren or younger neighbors to facilitate their ability to be in contact. Now they're shut in their homes. They have volunteers, if they're lucky, getting food for them, if anything. and now they can't be connected to the world that really means a lot to their own survival. So even though her response sounds pretty radical, what she was just saying was, as far as ease goes, she's not going to take my life. But as far as ease goes, she's like, it's easier to do that than it is to do this. Like, how do you do this? So you really have a whole bunch of people who are lost. They're lost, and it's hard for them to assimilate. It's been really rough.
Well, I feel like something of a dum-dum because I made an assumption that anyone who's in college is going to just embrace Zoom. And I can't imagine that I'm the only dum-dum out there who's just making very broad assumptions of how people are going to be reacting to change, whether the change we're going through now or any type of cosmic change that occurs in business.
If you don't mind me jumping back in just on that topic, I wrote an article not long ago called Game On, and it was based on that exact premise. We have this perception that certain groups can do certain things, or that there's no playbook for how to live online, for instance, during a period of pandemic, or during a pandemic, period. And there's an entire group of people who've been living like this for, it's about 30 years, and those are the people who play games. Yep. And I spoke to some people, and I looked at some research, and it turns out that there are like 50 million gamers over the age of 50, which was an interesting number. And that there is a playbook for this. You have an entire group of people who can tell us what to do, how to behave, how to not present well on the internet, how to bring ourselves across as if we still have the same business personality, if you will, that we did before this thing hit. And with the students, I have to tell you, I was caught very off guard. You're not a dum-dum. It's who would have known, because they're like this all of the time. So it was a surprise. I mean, really, it was a huge surprise. Gives me more to work on. It's okay.
And how do you, when you, in your business, when you're consulting for PR and marketing, put it nicely to people that their perceptions of demographics, such as what I just went through, isn't necessarily correct?
I think that you have to be honest with your clients. I think you have to explain to them. I think that one of the key pieces of moving forward today is truly understanding your customer base. Not only looking at your existing customer base, but also seeing where there's potential for new customers. I know that working with another essential company, they're in the home alarm industry, and they have decided that they're really going to focus on communicating with their current customers. It's not about adding new customers right now, it's supporting the customers that they have. And I think working in our field of communication, Phil, part of our job is to help shape those stories. Help people stay in touch with the people that they need to stay in touch with, whether it is their employees, whether it is their customers, whether it's their competitors or their supply chain. It's a question of how do you communicate today, and also how do you plan? Because as you know, as a former PR person, you used to have 6 and 9 month plans. Well, in this particular situation of the pandemic, we can't predict 6 or 9 months because, quite frankly, it's a global crisis. And I don't think that there's a person in the world today who's ever experienced a global pandemic.
No. But how many people do you have working with you?
33.
Right now,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I wasn't sure who that was for, Phil. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, so you have 33. What is your company culture like when it comes to people presenting ideas of doing something a different way?
We're somewhat collaborative. Speaking of communication, to Ann's point, I completely agree. I've actually focused on communicating with our employees a little bit more than some of our clients, because a lot of our field employees are communicating with our clients. So I didn't really want to get in the way. And I thought it was important, Phil, to your point regarding our culture, to use this whole episode or situation, if you want to call it that, as a way to kind of bring the company together a little bit tighter. We've done some bonding. I've done some video meetings like this. So 6 weeks ago, we didn't have a GoToMeeting account, and I don't want to necessarily promote one brand over another, but now we do. And everybody that works in this company knows how to get on their smartphone, their iPad, or their laptop, and we can see what their bedrooms look like, or their living rooms, or their kitchens. So I've visited each one of my employees' homes in the last few weeks, which is kind of funny. I started off with a video that I shot when the PPP thing was unfolding, and I essentially sent it out as a company-wide communique instead of just another email that, you know, I think gets a little diluted. And the feedback on my face on their screen delivering a message that everybody would be safe and secure from a financial point of view was overwhelmingly positive. So the culture, I think, during this pandemic is somewhat improving. It's sort of bringing us a little bit together in the fact that you've all heard the cliche, we're all in this together. Well, in fact, we are. And it was very important for me to hold our company together because we worked so hard finding people that fit in our culture, and I just didn't want to give up on that. So I'm hoping that we come out of this as a stronger, healthier organization. And one thing that I've done for a lot of people that are not able to remain productive working for the business is to try to do continuing education or training. We've done a bunch of safety certification. So I've used this time to try to give these folks something to do, stay connected to the industry. And we also did some volunteering. You talked about some hungry people out there. I'm on the board of the United Way of Westchester and Putnam, and they've done food drives for the last few weeks. So I've had a bunch of employees showing up, either bagging food or doing deliveries, and we've put that on social media. And it's not that I'm necessarily trying to leverage, you know, I'm sure Ann's going to laugh at this, but I'm not trying to leverage the bad news to bring us to a certain light, but in a sense I am. I'm just trying to share that we are trying to be creative and use this time that we're all getting paid for to do something good that's helping perhaps some people that need it.
You wanted to say something, Allyson?
I do. I want to jump into the computer and go, oh my God, you're brilliant. Because
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it's great leadership. It's great leadership. This is a period of time where you have to build human capital. That's what you have to build because that's the biggest resource you have. And you know, the proof is people are losing money, they're losing hours, they're losing everything. But the one thing they're not losing necessarily are the human beings. You know, it's
right.
where you place them and how you work with them that makes all of the difference. So just the fact that you're reaching out is such a big thing. Even if it's somebody you can't retain, the fact that you're reaching out and saying, you know what, you're really, really important. You're really important. This is just the way it is, but we're still here. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it really speaks to the quality of your company because you're at the helm of that. That's great.
I'm also trying to not be bashful and let the entire industry know that we're 100% employed and working so that perhaps I can attract a few good ones in the future.
Good.
How was that, Ann? Was that good for marketing and public relations?
I love it, and I'm also a firm believer in companies giving back. It's part of our mission, so I'm glad that it's part of yours as well.
Well, I'm very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in, so the least I could do is try to help those who aren't as fortunate.
As a journalist, I can't get over all the good news that I'm finding in these times. So, you know, everybody thinks in journalism, bad news is good news for us because that sells newspapers and it gets websites going. But I've been doing articles for the past month now about businesses around Westchester and Fairfield counties, and they're going beyond the extra mile to help those in need. And I don't ever remember seeing anything quite like this, not during the Great Recession or maybe in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, but never at such a grand scale as this. I think you'd have to go back to World War II, where you would have such an outpouring of altruism from the general population.
Such a good point. It's a great point.
One thing about the pandemic that, and I wasn't old enough to live through World War II, but no matter where you live or how much money you have or what you do for a living, you may not be safe from that invisible enemy. So we're all vulnerable to a certain degree. And I think that is maybe the catalyst that has brought out human side in a lot of people.
I think it was
Care to comment on that, Doctor?
I have so many things to comment on, right? The doctor's prerogative, we'll put it there, right? Phil, you were going to say something.
I was going to say, I think it was always there in a way, and it never really evaporated over the generations. It just needed something so utterly dramatic to tap into it and to reawaken it.
We saw some of that, I think, after 9/11. I remember a lot of people came together. A lot of people were driving around with flags on their cars, and a lot of people signed up for the military or for the fire department or the police department. So I think there was somewhat of a movement, and that was a very unfortunate incident. But it certainly wasn't as widespread as what we're going through now. This is a global thing. So that's a lot of people involved. And there's not really much that we can do about it except kind of ride it out and hope that we find a vaccine so that we feel untouched.
And let me ask you a question, because there's so much that's good going on. How are we able to not come across as being opportunistic or exploitative or calling too much attention to ourselves in times like this?
I think we have to be very careful. I think when we approach media outlets, or even when companies approach media outlets with stories, that they have to be sensitive and really know the beat of the journalists that they're speaking to. I know that most people today have had a COVID-19 focus, even if that was not their, they've moved from health and, breaking news to covering COVID-19. I think you have to try to find the story and make it genuine. People know when you're fake today, and it has to come from the heart. And I think that when people are doing things really from their heart, like Bud is doing, and I can think of at least 3 or 4 other examples relating to stories that you've written over the last couple of weeks, it's because people really care. People want to succeed. And some companies have to stay silent right now. There's no place for certain types of stories. But I think that if you're careful and you really think about who you want to target, maybe not go for national news stories today, but go for more regional stories, go for local stories, go for trade articles, look at those verticals, you can really get some traction.
Well, folks, I hope that the audience watching today's video presentation is having as much fun as I am conversing with you. Our time's going to be coming to an end in a few minutes, but if the viewers out there wanted to continue this conversation with you, how can they get in touch with each of you? Let's start with Allyson.
They can call me at 203-227-1622, or you can look me up through my website, which is www.allysonmaida.com.
Allyson is A-L-L-Y-S-O.
Yeah, my parents were very difficult.
Maida is M-I-D-A.
Couldn't be easy. Couldn't be Sue. Allison with 2 L's and a Y. S-O-N.
What about you, Ann? Where can we find you?
You can find me at www.danikapr.com, and my direct dial in the office is 203-661-3663.
And Bud, where can folks find you and your fully employed staff of HVAC?
Well, Phil, I'm all over LinkedIn. So Bud Hammer, or Google Bud Hammer or Google Atlantic Westchester. We have a website. Our phone number is plastered on the truck behind me. So if somebody wants to rewind it and pause, they have it there. Again, not trying to take total advantage of the situation, but yeah, so somebody threw a knuckleball and I'm trying to hit it just like everybody else, and trying to do what feels right. And ladies, thank you very much for the nice compliments. It means a lot. So thank you. And I'm very honored to be a part of this.
Likewise. Really great.
Likewise.
This is great.
Yeah, great meeting you.
Bud, thank you so much for viewers today's video. Thank you. And you can follow us on westfaironline.com. I'm Phil Hall, and we will see you again very, very soon. So have yourselves a good one.